welcome to the first Get Funded Live event where we build a bridge between farmers and investors and funders, where we're looking to take that vision and turn it into a real, tangible, investable, bankable project. This is the first Get Funded Live event we've ever run. We have, obviously, in the past, for some of you joining us, you may remember in the past, we've run several events with expert panels and everything else, and I'm delighted to be joined on this, our first live event, with one of our expert panels from our past events, Mr. Ernest Papadoyianis. Ernest, how are you?
I'm great, Eamon. Thanks.
Good. So
Wonderful to be here.
Thanks very much for being with us for this first event. I couldn't actually think of anyone better, to be honest, to kick this off with than you, because obviously what we're trying to create here is that bridge between farmers, agriculturalists, and the investors, the lenders, and obviously enabling them to transition from that state of vision and into investable bankable project. And I mean, you've lived both sides of that, in the sense of, you know, if you look at the aquaculture industry, leading the first publicly listed aquaculture company in the States, many would probably call you the godfather of the industry, or one of the godfathers of the industry in the United States. And you've had, I mean, there's so many stories from your side where you have lived that from both sides. You've been that bridge for industry and funding. So I suppose, look, in terms of, I was thinking about this earlier, Ernest, in terms of what we could cover today. And I think, you know, some of the phone calls that you and I had, some of the conversations we have, we could probably just record one of those, right? And put it up, right? But we've got about 30 minutes today to get through something meaningful, something insightful, where we can pass on a bit of wisdom on that. And I thought a good starting point might be to talk about disruption, because I know in a lot of the work you've done in the past, and some of the work you're doing at the moment, and some of the work you're doing in tandem with the overall Get Funded vision, is very, very disruptive, right? So I thought that would be a good place to start, and let's see where that conversation leads. Obviously, guys, we are going out live here on LinkedIn. For those of you joining us live, do feel free to leave comments. I'll be keeping an eye on the comments, and you can ask questions. We can go in and out. Just bear in mind, there is a little bit of a delay from what we're saying to when it actually reaches you guys. So if you ask a question, we don't get to it for about 10 or 20 seconds. That's what's going on there. But Ernest, okay, disruption, right? So it's interesting because the status quo, the established companies, the industry leaders tend not to like it, but a lot of those guys originally would have been, you know, major disruptors at their beginning. So what function does disruption play in the environment in terms of agriculture and in terms of securing investment for agriculture? Why is it important, or is it important at this moment in time? Are we at a stage where we should just leave everything as it is, or are we at a stage where we need massive disruption? What are your thoughts?
That's a great question. I think there's a couple different angles to that question, and in answering it. One of them certainly revolves around the economics and disruption in terms of the economic model. And the second one that comes to mind is, of course, you know, quality. And I guess there's a third angle too, which is the actual mass production, if you will. So there's actually kind of three. So I guess I'd address it in terms of the economics. The disruption that we're looking at now with a lot of ag tech is how we can grow on a mass scale, a medium to mass scale, and reduce the cost. Because historically, if we're being real, agriculture and aquaculture are high risk, low margin business. It's just, we know farmers, it's a generational business for them, you know, historically. And people farm because they love the life, they love the land, they love doing what they're doing, and kind of that fulfillment, if you will, of bringing a seed or a fingerling, you know, to growth to market. So they do it for that, not necessarily for the, you know, 100x returns down the road. So I think technology plays, you know, a huge role, obviously, in that. If we can eliminate cost, obviously that's a huge factor. Quality for me really seems to be one of the major issues, because in our mission of increasing quantity, we've lost all touch with quality. Sadly, and you know, what we're doing now is just trying to stamp out on the for the most part on mass scale, is stamping out something that's remotely edible.
And on that, I'm just going to come in on that. And if we talk about technology coming in from that point of view of um, cost and quantity, right? And I have concerns around the cost element as well. But just on the quantity versus quality, do you think any of the technologies that are coming on stream, let's say, for example, hydroponics, for example, boasting huge quantities on relatively small footprints of land, but never mind that, huge quantities at qualities that maybe are, the generations that went before us would have been used to. Do you think technology is looking like it's going to play that role, or is it going to be more of the same, less? Because the problem with it is, right, if you're degrading quality to increase quantity, then it's a never-ending cycle of needing more quantity to get the same nutritional value, if you know what I mean. So do you think
I don't know where we're going to get there, but yeah.
Yeah. So do you think technology is going to play? Is that where you see technology taking the industry into a model that balances quality with quantity?
Yeah, I think there's some tremendous companies and technologies out there now that, and I'm not just talking about the robotics, the drones, that kind of thing. That's strictly on the cost basis, but a lot of the push toward regenerative agriculture and some of the ag tech that you and I are familiar with, that's really communicating with plants and seeing the needs of plants and reducing water usage, fertilizer usage, and pesticide usage. And along the quality that you talk about, that you mentioned, I would even split that into two tiers. One, quality being nutritional quality, and part B being non-toxic quality, i.e. not loaded with pesticides. I think the hydroponics is a good example. Certainly not as nutritious as our agriculture was, 40, 50 years ago, where the soil quality was so good. But yet again, a complete reduction in pesticides because of the indoor footprint. So is it beneficial? Sure. I think a lot of the conversations we've had are the rebirth of small farms and organic farming is cutting into that. It's never going to completely fulfill the mass scale, but the quality is really good. People are starting to buy locally, not even solely organic, but buying more locally, where the quality in small farms, play a role. And I think that even goes one step further, where we can hopefully down the road make smaller units that are controlled at the home basis, so people can grow products at home. Obviously not everything, but even if they have, spices, few tomato plants, few pepper plants, something to subsidize their grocery store bill, and also grow it in a quality manner. Then,
well, it's interesting you actually say that. On a bit of an aside, it's something I've seen 2 or 3 times in the last few years in Ireland, where some of the, let's call it the home technology retailers, I'm talking about, that over here would be Curry's, PC World, Harvey Norman, that sell computers, they sell refrigerators, they sell washing machines, that kind of home technology. They've started on and off, not as a consistent shelf item, but on and off, you will see them retailing small home hydroponic units, right? That sit on a shelf somewhere, set up a worktop, and you can grow your microgreens, you can grow your salads, you can grow even, you could looking at them, you could grow small onions, small tomato varieties, and things like that, right? So I definitely think that is, and that's been a narrative for a while. I mean, we had the movement of the allotments in towns as well, where a piece of land adjacent to a town or within a town is divided up into small little allotments for people to have their own little garden variety, fruit and veg growing year round. But on the cost side of things, right? So obviously, this I feel is a story that's been told. I mean, we have a series of articles on LinkedIn about the evolution of agriculture through technology and innovation, right? And how every time there's a population boom, right, it's normally precursed by a technological boom in agriculture, right? This timeline probably be the only exception to that, where medicine, kind of prolonged lives and created a bit of a boom, and now agriculture finds itself catching up. But on the cost basis, technology comes in and makes the cost of producing lowers the cost of producing the food, which in theory, or at least at the very outset initially, is a very good thing for the farmer because it should widen their margin, right? But we've seen historically that, pressure comes from the distributor, the wholesalers, the retailers, their buyers. I'll tell you a story in Dublin of a farmer. I won't say who it is, but a farmer that's growing. We'll actually change the crop variety. We'll say he was growing tomatoes. Okay, he wasn't, but we'll say he was growing tomatoes. And a very large retailer in Ireland rang him to tell this farmer that we've ran your numbers on your farm, and we've decided that you can afford to grow these tomatoes for 10 cents less per whatever the measure was, right?
Right.
He said, okay, fine. He said, that's fine, whatever. I'll sell you the crop at that. I'm getting out next year anyways. This is going to be my last crop, right? So they rang him back a couple of days later and they said, well, we've run the numbers again, and actually we can afford to pay you what we've always paid you. We just need you to keep growing, right? Keep growing the crop. And he said, no, you don't understand. He said, it's nothing to do with you, Lauren. I'd already made the decision. I'm out. Okay. He said, okay. So the retailer, the guy he was dealing with, that person's boss rang him back about a week later and said, you know what, actually we ran the numbers and we can afford to pay you 10 cents more than we used to pay you. We just need you to keep growing the tomatoes, right? And he said, no, you don't understand. I'm done. I'm out. This is our last crop, right? So when you hear stories like that, originally the retailer was trying to widen their margin, let's say, right? And as it transpired, they were in a position to actually help the farmer and widen it. And again, I don't want to bring up a conversation of retailer versus farmer. I'm not into that. I mean, I think there's a holistic, inclusive, collaborative solution here. But I suppose the crux of my question is, if we bring in technology to further reduce the cost base for the production of these whatever various produce, are we ultimately going to have more of the same, where the buyers put their foot on the throats of the farmers and go, well, you can afford to produce it for less now, so we're going to pay you less. So it doesn't actually benefit the technology. Then doesn't actually benefit the farmer from a cost point of view.
That's a really good question. I think that's a lot of why these farmers markets that are now everywhere are booming up, and people, both sides love the model because it's a lot more work for the farmers, because instead of just growing, they have to retail on that side too. But they cut out the middleman so they can make more money on that side. But yeah, there's always going to be that model where the distributors are going to want the product for less. And obviously the distributors, the middleman in this equation between the farmer, obviously, and the retail customer, has a lot lower risk than the farmer himself. And so, again, that's why a lot of the co-ops came up, that farmers got together to sell product, to say, we're not making enough margin here, and let's get together and sell in volume so we can satisfy, a retail outlet. But yes, I would answer yes to your question. I think it's going to actually, the distributors are going to try to do the same thing.
Yeah. And I think I know in Ireland is a bit of a unique situation because of how we farm here and the size of the farms and everything else. And we were, the co-ops in Ireland were competing with initially trying to compete with some of the co-ops in Europe. And I know in certain cases that the retailers or the buyers, I don't want to pick on just retailers, it's more than just retailers, buyers, but the buyers essentially did the same thing and tried, put their foot down on the co-ops, right? And I think that for certain territories, for certain countries where, and we were only talking about this the other day with a lady that's coming on to Get Funded Live soon. In America, if you're farming cattle, right, 500 head of cattle is a small farm in America. It's huge over here, right? So it's the difference in scale. So that I think is a challenge that some of the countries that run a smaller model for agriculture face on that front as well. But if we were to bring it into, getting all of this funded, because all this talk is great, right? Disruption and technology and lowering cost and increasing quality and, maintaining output and all the rest of it is fantastic, but someone has to pay for it, right? So I know you and I agree, like when we look at funds for, that are interested in agriculture, you dig a little bit deeper into it. There's actually agricultural technology, right, that they're interested in investing in, right? And because it's sexy and it's attractive and it's appealing and everyone knows technology, and that's great. Where I see the roadblock then, or where I see the obstacle, is coming from the technology company getting that technology down onto farms. That's where it seems to grind to a halt. And I'm not saying it's an easy journey, by the way, for technology companies to get funding. That it has its own challenges and everything else. But to get an investor or a lender to even look at a farm. So, and I find it really interesting, right? They'll invest in the technology, but they won't invest in the implementation of the technology. And if you don't invest in the implementation of technology, right, that's where is it going to go?
Right. That's like investing in the product, but not investing in any marketing.
Yeah. You see, you've got a warehouse, got a warehouse full of stuff, but like no one can buy it.
Right.
So what are I've no particular question around that at the moment. But just what are your thoughts on that challenge?
So I think that there right now, and look, to me, there has to be a marriage, right? So if we're gonna go to a fund to present and solicit funding from that fund, I think it's really helpful to have all the ducks in the row in terms of the farming aspect, but also integrating that technology together. We know that from the experience you and I have had in agriculture, that just going with a straight farming operation, that John Smith, wants to grow corn on 100 acres, institutional capital and even high net worth investors are really interested in that model. It's again very low margin, high risk. So what is it? What's the special sauce that's going to trigger capital to want to invest in that? I mean, yes, it's the margins, of course, but what is the integration? Is it I always tell clients that you're going to do it better, faster, cheaper, or proximal to more proximal to the market than your competition, so you can eliminate freight. One of those factors has to jive to make you a viable business. Otherwise, you're just a lemming in line, right? So if you can deploy that technology, if you can modify it, if you can get an agreement for licensing use of it, and prove to capital that you can do it better than the farm across the street that doesn't deploy that, and it's going to have some effect in terms of, is it just the cost? Is it that we're going to be able to eliminate pesticides and grow pesticide free? So we have kind of not an exclusive market, but an upper level market, so to speak, which is what, I'll share the story on our fish farm. We did that as well, but you can see it in chicken right now, right? There's the regular chicken that you can buy in the store. There's organically certified chicken or eggs. And then there's the pasture raised, right? Where people aren't going through all the bells and whistles of getting organically certified, but they're growing healthy product in a healthy environment. And because at the end of the day, organic is wonderful, but all the hoops and bells and whistles that you have to go through to get organically certified and maintain organic production, I'll speak for the States, under like USDA certification, is expensive. If you have to wash every shovel and every sprayer and every shoe, 6 times and bleach it and have that protocol. And I'm not saying it's not viable or it's not beneficial, but it ups the cost, right? And of course, that's why, organic is so expensive. But my point is that there's a market in between there that's and I'm getting off of a tangent of your question, but there's a market in between there that I think farmers need to get, creative on too, because creative marketing, creative production creates that niche market that people are going to be interested in. And with our fish farm, what we did, and this was 25 years ago, there were a lot of hybrid striped bass producers, and in the States there was and is sadly, no organic certification for seafood, even after almost 30 years of going through that process, which is very, very sad and unnecessary. However, we took the approach of, okay, we're gonna put in our own standards in growing this product. We're not going to use any additives in the feed, no coloring agents, no antibiotics, no chemicals. Here's our feed tag. It's raised all natural. It's killed in an ice bath humanely. So here's our protocol. So the chefs love that, because when they sold the product, they put that there. We've looked at the feed tag. It's grown humanely. It's grown it's killed in a humane way. So we got a premium for our product, and we didn't have to go through the hoops of being, not that we could have, but being organic.
Yeah.
So,
and again, that all comes back to I think there's a chicken and egg scenario here, right? When it comes to investment, because what you described there with what you did with fish farms would be something that would be very attractive to investors, because you went out and proved it, right? You improved the market, and you were looking at scaling over startup kind of thing and all that good stuff. So there's a bit of chicken and egg, but I want to come to what Donnie said here in a second, because I think it's interesting, right? In the comments, we'll come to it in a second, but it's so there is that chicken and egg between, you got to get started, but it's very hard to get. It's very slow. It's grind. It's hustle. It's whatever language you want to put on it until you get started. Right now, for an established farmer, it might be a little bit different, because they're looking to implement something new. They can show a case study of that thing being done on another farm, or whatever the case may be. But I think if we come to Donnie, so Donnie had it up a second ago. He says here, it starts at the farm. Ask him or her what they need, invest in them, then that investment will grow. And I would agree with that, right? But let's flip that the other way around, because I mean, farmers are very good at getting things to grow, what they do, right? So typically speaking, if you invest in a savvy farmer, a good farmer, as long as the money has real purpose on the farm, it always should work out. But let's flip that on the other way around, right? Because this is something we see quite a lot. We see people saying, ask the farmer what he or her wants, right? And that's very important. That's where business plans come in. That's where executive summaries come in and all that. And that's an area of expertise for you as well, Ernest. But the question nobody ever seems to ask, right? And this is not unique to farming, by the way. This is not unique to technology. This is across the board, I would say, in finance and funding and investment. The question nobody seems to ask is, ask the investor what he or she wants, right? That's something no one seems to ask. And that, I think, is one of the biggest obstacles in terms of securing investment for farming, for all types of projects, but particularly in farming. And typically, they want to see contracts secured, right? Okay, those contracts can be pending investment, right? Or they can be pending something, right? They want to see, like at the very least, they want to see letters of intent from buyers, which, as you and I know, Ernest, are not worth the paper they're written on, right? But they want to see letters of intent. They want, and particularly in farming, because you are not dealing with a product that you can hold on to for 10 years, right? Or even 10 months, right? You've got to sell it when it's harvested, right? So they want to see the offtake agreements. You are saying, so what typically happens is a farmer comes in and say, we can do X, Y, Z. This is the output we can get. This is the yield from the crop. We need this money for this technology. And then off we go. We're going to get it. And the investor is going, yeah, perfect. Great. We're not disputing that at all. Right. And your market value for that produce, we're not disputing that at all. All that is there on the record, verifiable. The risk element obviously is always, with farming, what if there's crop failure or whatever? We acknowledge all those risks. That's all okay. But you're telling us you're going to produce all this produce, right? But you're not telling us who's going to buy it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because we, another little story from the aquaculture scene, but we had, we were a fairly large producer. We used to speak at a lot of the conferences on business development because of that particular reason. It was a lot of the farmers, especially the small scale farmers and the fish farmers, were build it and they will come mentality. So we get people that would call us and say, I've got 30,000 pounds of tilapia that are ready for market. Do you know a buyer?
Yeah.
And of course, if it's a widget, if it's this and I don't have a buyer today, okay, I can put it on the shelf and I'll sell it tomorrow. Yeah. Of course, and with agriculture, the same, but especially with fish farming, you're pouring every day that goes by that you don't sell that product, your margin goes down because you're pumping labor, electricity, feed, oxygen, all those cost factors are going into that fish. And the bigger it gets, of course, sometimes you even price yourself out of the market because someone doesn't want that size product. So all of that comes into play. So yeah, that those letters of intent and that de-risking environment that you mentioned is what investors are going to look for and ask for. They want that to be de-risked. And again, along the funny stories, we get people who would come up with projects and say, I use tilapia because it's what everyone wanted to grow back 20 years ago, but I'm going to grow tilapia and, who are you going to sell it to? Well, Whole Foods is paying $4 a pound for it. And if I produce 100,000 pounds, I can make, $400,000. Do you have a letter from them that says they're going to buy from you? No, but they're paying $4 a pound. Yeah, but they're not paying you $4 a pound.
Right.
So I mean, and these they're little and we laugh about them, but these are major business faux pas that ruin your business, that destroy the business and reduce the credibility. So as you said, investors want the I's dotted, the T's crossed. That shows that you've made that effort at least, right? Like you said, and you're absolutely right. Letters of intent are what they are. It's the paper. It's the relationship you have with that person. But it shows that you've made the effort to do that because you know that the investor is going to ask for that, right?
Yeah. And again, a lot of the time, when we see projects coming through, it's not their area of expertise, right? Their area of expertise is whatever they do, right? Be it food manufacturing, be it agriculture, be it food technology or agricultural technology. They're engineers, they're farmers, or they're scientists, right? That's usually who we end up dealing with. Academics or practicals, right? There's very little crossover skill set wise, I think, or thinking wise between how we'll say an investor thinks and how any of those types of people think, right? So what often happens is we end up having a conversation and everyone's using the same language, but everyone has different meaning for the language being used, right? And oftentimes it can end up in conflict. So I think it's really important to, you've got to look at it from both sides. And again, that's what we're trying to do through Get Funded is builds that bridge between how the investor thinks and how the lender thinks and how the borrower thinks, right? And get the conversation happening in a collaborative, unified way rather than what often happens. It goes into conflict, and not because they should naturally be in conflict, but it's because they speak two different versions of English. And it's as simple as that. I do want to come to, and we've only got a couple of minutes left, but I do want to come to this question here, okay? Because I think it's a good question. How do investors view the potential of vertical farming and urban agriculture in terms of scalability, profitability, and sustainability? Additionally, what specific factors or metrics do they consider when evaluating investments in these areas? Ernest, you and I could spend a day talking about that, right? I'm going to hand over to you because I know you have probably a little bit more experience in the vertical farming side of things than I do. I know you've been involved with some hydroponic projects and that side. I want to let you take that on.
Yeah, so these sophisticated investors in that field will look at comps, right? Who's out there? Who's doing it? Who's your competition? Why have they succeeded and failed? And what are you going to do differently? Same thing we spoke about before.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I was speaking to someone this is going back probably 8 months ago, about a hydroponic operation, and we just had a major, not to mention names, but a major hydroponic grower that sailed here in the States. And one of the main reasons was the energy component, that the energy cost was just too high. First thing the fund asked was, well, why are you going to succeed? What are you going to do differently? How are you going to overcome this major bottleneck? So you better have answers for all those. You better know your competition really, really well, and what their weaknesses are, what their strengths are, and how you're going to sell this to the investor. Because that's the whole purpose of business, is competition, right? If you're Burger King and you're set up across from McDonald's, what are you going to do? Why are you going to be successful? What are you going to do differently? It used to be in the day that you could have it your way at Burger King, right?
Yeah, and I think for the point of view of the hydroponics as well, from an investment point of view, I mean, the majority of hydroponic projects that we've seen come through have been led by engineers, right? They've been designed and led by engineers, and that's fine, right? From the investor point of view, I think a lot can be borrowed from manufacturing, right? Because it is moving into a space where we are still growing food, but it's actually a lot closer to a manufacturing process than it is to an agricultural or a farming process, because everything can be controlled, everything can be, and there are still things that can go wrong. Investors, in my mind, should tend to love it, right? Because it de-risks a hell of a lot of stuff that the field doesn't, right? You can give a lot more security in that, and but again, you have to have the T's crossed, the I's dotted. You have to have the buyers in place. You have to have the business has to make sense. It can be very expensive from a capex point of view. It can also be very expensive from an opex point of view, right? So they don't like that, right? It's going to cost me a lot to set it up, and it's going to cost me a lot to run it.
That's exactly what I was going to say, because you and I know we spoke to a company, a year ago, and the cost of the capex cost is just the time frame for return on investment in that type of company is longer than a dirt field, that's for sure. Yeah, it's de-risked, but does an investor want to wait that long to invest, $3, $4, $5 million in a medium-sized farm that's going to take, 5-6 years to break even?
It's de-risked, but in another way, it's re-risked again in terms of
Times required.
Yeah, your timelines and your cap, the cap, because it's something to remember, right? Your investor, you're not the only one that your investor is investing in. And if they're investing in you, it's debt or equity. Let's say it's equity, right? You're not the only equity that they're investing in. But the other thing to remember is equity probably isn't the only thing that they're investing in. They'll be investing in bonds somewhere as well. They'll be investing in deposits. Possibly they could be investing in property in places, and this, that, and the other. And a really important part from their point of view, from their portfolio, you're only going to be part of their portfolio. And liquidity is a really hot topic at the minute, because of what's happening with inflation and everything else. Like liquidity versus security against inflation is a really hot topic. And I don't think hydroponics, in my mind, would be not a very, I would say that the amount of time, although it's liquid, right? There is good liquidity there, but it's the timeline almost makes that defunct, because you got to hold on to the investment for a certain amount of time before you can make your full return, right? Versus, a field where you've got the liquidity. I mean, if you take property, right? Property, it isn't liquid because you can't sell it quickly, right? Well, it's going to take you whatever amount of time to sell your property to liquidate it and that, but it is quite resistant to inflation and so on and so forth. With hydroponics, I think from that front, the investor has the worst of both worlds, in that they cannot exit that investment quickly,
Well, the other thing with the vertical systems that are obviously so popular now too is, and hydroponics, as you know, is not I mean, you can grow almost anything. You can grow trees in hydroponic too, but obviously that's very, very rare. But, most of the big vertical systems that you and I speak of, 12, 15 rows high, are very limited from a space plant, from the lighting standpoint. So the crops are very limited. 99% of all these systems are doing, small leafy greens, the microgreens, the herbs, lettuces, things like that. So there's not a lot of diversification into the market from that standpoint, because everyone is doing the same product line. If you had the systems, and again, it's very difficult to go vertically in these, but if you could do, a lot of the fruity crops and the eggplants and, and squashes and all those things and diversify outside of those leafy greens, it would be a whole different ballgame. But that's a whole different.
Yeah. We could do another live stream. Maybe we'll do another live stream on that. But look, we're gone a little bit over time here, so we're going to cut it at that. Thank you all for your comments. And if you're watching this back on the replay, do send us a message, reach out to myself, reach out to Ernest. We've got our next Get Funded Live is coming up on the 14th of June. It's going to be 10 a.m. Irish UK time. We're going to be joined by Mike Deacon, a very, very influential player in the finance space in the UK, very much top of his industry. He's the director of the National Association of Financial Brokers in the UK. You're talking 30 plus years experience. You're talking probably hundreds of millions of pounds worth of investment secured and deals done through his career. So we're really excited to have him. We're going to have Emily on the 28th of June at 4 p.m. Irish time, which is sometime in the US. Depends. It's morning. It'll be AM for the guys in America. Emily's based in America. It's going to be AM depending on what side of the coast you're on. But it'll be AM for you guys over there. And Emily is a huge advocate. She's actually out of it at the moment, meeting farmers and dealing with ranchers and collecting their stories. So it's going to be really, really interesting to have her on. She's a huge advocate for the industry, comes from an agricultural background herself, and I'm really looking forward to that. And obviously then, guys, we have the Get Funded events coming back soon as well. In July, we're going to be back with the Get Funded events on the 4th of July. If you've been there, you know what it's about. If you haven't, you need to get there, because this is where we get a panel of experts. Ernest has been on with us a number of times earlier this year and last year. And we get experts from all over the world to come on, and you guys actually get to spend a little bit of time with them. We have a bit of a structure to it. You get to spend a little bit of time with them, ask questions, deep dive, extract their wisdom, extract their knowledge. They're absolutely brilliant events. That's going to be 4th of July, 5:45 Irish UK time. We do not have a panel of speakers confirmed. We've got a few of the wings. We don't have any of the speakers confirmed yet. We will be announcing that over the next few weeks. You can catch all of that on the website, stateraagri.com. Go to the events and broadcast section. In events, you'll find all the information about the Get Funded event, where to register, how to get your seat, and all the rest of it. And you can see all the upcoming broadcasts as well, these Get Funded Lives. You can check them out there as well. So thank you all very much from me. Ernest, thank you for coming on and joining us, and we'll catch you the next time.
My pleasure.